right, folks, welcome to episode 2 of the 2022 podcast. It's been a couple of years since we've got to do this. I've been called away for a lot of R&D, and travel had been restricted, and for a host of other reasons, we're just now getting back into it. So we're starting off big with Karl Binger at Paris Natural Farms. We've discussed year 1. So we're going into year 2, and I think this is when we really started to work together a little bit more. I specifically remember getting ready for, I think, the snowpocalypse 2021 that we had in Texas here last, February?
Yeah, almost a year ago.
Yeah, so you've got a year under your belt at this point. I'm going to start off with the same question again. 20 flats the first year. How many flats are we looking at propagating at this point?
Yeah, and so we went a little crazy, but before I even say that, so this is actually, so it's the first year going to the second year, but I had never grown year round. And so last winter was actually our first time growing, like starting something in the fall, which is really unorthodox for me, but I knew I wanted to do that because, by this time it's like I'm starting to see the writing on the wall. Hey, there's a market. We can actually sell produce year round. Our farmers market goes into what they call a mini market. And so the fact that we had an avenue to sell, I thought, well, let's try doing this. And so last year was our first year attempt at growing year round, right through the fall and into winter.
We're going to have a series of starts on this particular episode. The mini market at Paris is basically there's a traditional season, March through November.
Yeah, May through October.
So that's when the main farmers market is. And the mini market was not there when I was there. So basically a few of you guys kind of banded together and be like, hey, we're still going to have a market irregardless of the season. But there's a meat vendor and a drink vendor and a couple other folks. Cold, man. That's some cold days for you right there. How is the clientele braving all of that stuff? Plus, we have to also couple in, it's Christmas, it's New Year's, it's this, it's that. There's a lot of things competing for that time, a lot of things competing for financial, money from folks at the end of the year. Let's talk about that mini market for a second.
Yeah, so our first season going into that, we were lamprey. We were like, hey, the big guys are up here, selling their meat and drinks and things. And so we were just kind of there. And while they were there, we would get some of their business from their clientele. Now, I fast forward that literally 1 year later, perfect example was New Year's Day, this past Saturday. We weren't up there on Christmas Day, but there were only so we sent out just a message to all, on our social media platforms. Hey, we're going to be at the market tomorrow from 11 to 1. This was on Friday night. We did that. And there were 4 vendors. None of the big guys were there. And yet we had one of our best days ever, because now we're to that spot where people are dependent and relying on us to be there every week so they can get their lettuces, the stuff that they always want to get from us, And that was a true tell sign for us, because now we were that vendor that was actually bringing in all the customers to feed, some of the other vendors that were there.
And so you have to ask yourself, were you the lamprey? Were you being a predator on everybody else's, or were you actually developing your own market from the get-go?
Right. And there's a little mystery, and I don't know. I think it was a little bit of both. I know for sure that, there was that initial customer base came from those people that really are focused on buying local, And those people would buy from, Cook's Farm and Ranch and get the kombucha from Boost Brew and things and work their way down, because we had produce. So it complemented what they were doing, and people would start tagging, hey, look, I just got my fresh meat, I got my kombucha, and now look, I got my salad, And so that naturally started drawing that in. But then we started establishing our own customer base, and, they literally, the same ones. It reminds me of the same from Joe from Polyface Farm, Joe, whatever
Salatin.
Yeah, Salatin, that's right. And he said, I'd rather have 100 customers that spend $1,000 or 1,000 customers spending $100, and that whole thing of where you realize, like, your customers are a far extension of your family, at least in the business side of it, they're part of that farm family. And they're now, on a cadence every week, and so they expect to come and get their produce.
And I'm the worst. I show up once every 3 weeks because I'm never in town.
Yeah. But hey, it's still good to see those people. I mean, that's not uncommon either.
Well,
right?
and the thing about it is, when I come up, I buy several bags of the same thing because I know it's going to last 3 or 4, weeks as I'm going into, whatever travels I'm having, because I never know where I'm going to be. So the winter market's in effect.
Yep.
You're getting into 4-season farming. You have the infrastructure set up. Year 2, it's you're very much into succession planting. You've got seed starts going all the time. 20 flats that first year. What kind of volume are we looking at year 2?
Yeah, we went up to about 5,000 plants. And it was pretty aggressive. And a lot of those what we thought we were going to sell, not knowing the year that we were going to be facing. We had so many tomato plants that we just ended up selling because of the late frost and just everything. Just the 2-week storm. Everybody's gardens got washed out, and some of that worked in our favor because they'd come back and buy more. But we still ended up with a ton of leftover plants, and so. But we started the year off thinking, okay, we need plants for our farm and also for selling. And so it was a lot more there was more method involved in defining that, what do we want to plant? Whereas the first year was like, let's just fill up all the trays we have, and the second year was like, oh, okay, this is how many plants we want to sell, and this is how many that we're going to grow. And so, we went out and got more trays and, actually planned it out. And this year I'm even looking forward to how it's going to be even more refined from that. But yeah, so we went way and above and beyond. I don't even know what that math looks like in terms of trays, but we have, I can tell you this, our 20 by 64 hoop house was completely full. We had, we had 4 by 8 tables on both sides all the way down, and then one row in the middle even, and they were all full. And that was with potting up, right? So as you pot up, space, gets smaller because you go from 50 to 72 plug cells to now you can only get, maybe 25 plants in that same amount of space, maybe not even, right? So, but we filled that greenhouse. It was completely full of plants.
This is about the time that you had really started pulling back the silage tarps just north of the hoop house. 100 foot by?
Yep, 100 by about 150. Now it's expanded, but at that time, it was about 100 by 150.
I can't remember. You're going to have to help me remember. So when we came out, you had kale. I know you had some broccoli going because we were putting the frost blankets up at that time. Yeah. And then into the summer, you had planted a little early the tomato plants. Turned out everything was fine because we cobbled enough stuff together to get everything covered. You're at such volume, and there's much more at stake because every seed costs money, every tray costs money. You have all this compost, digging up beds, you're silage tarping. There's all that extra cost that when you're sitting back in Fort Worth, you're not thinking about silage tarps.
No.
You're not thinking about extra hoses. I mean, every hose you buy is incredibly expensive, plus the fittings.
Yep, there was a lot of learning on that. And not only that is I was shifting, this is another transition in this process, moving from standard till, throw stuff in the ground, weed it until you're burnt out, and then harvest, what the bugs and the weeds didn't get. And so we transitioned into low till, I guess you could call it low till, no till, where we're doing permanent beds. And so that was all brand new at the turn of, last winter was literally when we made our first raised beds, or last fall, I think it would be in 2020, it would have been. And so just a lot of changes in there. And every time I've known this now, any time that a change is made, whether it's me or an employee does something that's not standard, there's always a cause and effect ripple, and sometimes people are thinking they're being creative by making a minor change. And even I get caught doing this, and I have to stop myself from doing something different because you just don't know what the ripple effects are going to be. And the more you get into this, the less time you have to deal with, random changes and things,
Matt, I'm really glad you brought this up. This wasn't planned in our talk, but every day customer service gets a call and somebody's wanting to drastically reinvent the wheel and the way things are done. There's this line that we all cross as farmers, as tinkerers, as people that can do. We see a lot of the time people want to reinvent the wheel just for the sake of, just because I think it'll work. I think it'll be good. They want to do something without thinking about that ripple effect. If you do this, labor is going to exponentially increase. If you do that, the cost of starting it, you'll never, it's so expensive to do this add-on or do this, make this thing taller. There's, for us, one of the most common questions is, I want to make my hoop house taller. Okay, what are you going to plant? I'm going to plant lettuce. Well, why do you need a 20-foot tall greenhouse, twice the amount of plastic, all this extra labor up front for a crop that doesn't need to be trellised up? And in your case, the gutter connects. How tall are those at the peak?
13 feet, I think.
So 13 feet, plenty of room to do trellising, fine crops. This notion of height, and I'm a big fan of air mass. I love the taller the better for me for air mass. These ripple effects, by changing the status quo from something that works. You read all these books going into this. Every time you went away from those plans and away from those suggestions, let's get into that.
So, I mean, in the books don't tell you all of those things, but there are a lot of standards, but like anytime I want to change something, like here's a good one right now, irrigation. Like I was really hesitant to, you were testing out some of that irrigation, your new product line that you have. And I did not want to do it because to me, I've got a system in place.
Right.
And anytime you implement a new system, you don't know all the nuances. Everything in farming, everything that's man-made has nuances. And that's the way it's been throughout everything. And so, changing out the irrigation system, but that was a good one for me actually, because that one I'm really starting to enjoy, has pros and cons. Maybe we can talk about that sometime, the two types and the pros and cons. But anytime that you implement, whether it's a new irrigation system, a new method, there's just so many nuances. We think, we watch a YouTube video and all of a sudden it's like, I should use this, like Curtis Stone uses the traditional yard sprinkler and he's got them set up on, a 90-degree angle? Yeah. And it's like, okay, so you start running down that path and you're like, this sucks, it's like, why didn't I see this? And you just, because we can't comprehend what we don't know, and we just see the silver lining and everything, rose-colored glasses, and that is so timely. And so the more brakes you can put on inventing new stuff and trying new things, I mean, sometimes you have to, right? But and if it's on your dime, that's fine. But like I have my aunt and then another worker and my wife. And so, but when they do something that is like brand new, like, my Auntie Diane, last year she decided to cut holes in the landscape fabric and offset everything, not realizing that landscape fabric, it's a 20-year product. And now those holes that are all offset, I have to now work with. My drip lines don't go offset, right? And so she wasn't thinking like, there's a reason why we have to do, make holes straight in line, right?
And I think that's what I was trying to say a minute ago. A lot of people want to make these changes before they actually farmed. Mm-hmm. I think it's totally okay to get into it.
Yeah.
Be standard, start small. As you develop your own needs, every farm is vastly different from each other. Yeah. And so if you're going to go that far off the norm, I at least suggest doing somewhat by the book, to say.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Before you learn, okay, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you do need a hire. And that one would be a little bit more expensive. But I really think that once you actually get inside of a hoop house, the opportunities that presents without major modifications, very expensive modifications and very permanent ones, are going to suit you just fine.
Yeah. And I would, just to sum that up too, I mean, stick with standard if you can, as where possible, standardize everything. And that goes for, bed sizes, lengths, everything you do, like when you read the book, like follow them because you have no experience. You have no idea what you're getting into. And so, especially if you're a DIYer, I mean, you're going to always want to be like, oh, I could just do this. Oh, I could do this. I could do this. And that's great. It satisfies that inner DIYer, but at the same time, while you get going, I mean, it's great. Just just plagiarize the crap out of everything you do.
What could you have done with that time and effort? And so I'm glad you brought up the irrigation, because this is hard realities of this time in our life, 2020 to 2022. Jeez.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
The irrigation right now. You talked about it. We're testing it out on your farm. We don't have it released yet. Number one, it's a little out of season. We're sitting on a ton of inventory on sprinklers. We haven't released it because we are still waiting on parts to get made to finish out the kit that we're putting together. I have a lot of irrigation experience from the lawn care industry, so I very much well know lawn and shrubbery and all that kind of irrigation. And on my own farm, talking about systems, talking about standardization, well, from one company to the next, it was very cheap for me to buy PVC and adapt that to farming. As we started to look into more agricultural based companies, that's not something that we want to produce. I mean, we're great at trays. We're great at, the hoop houses. The irrigation is a part of the kits that we want to sell. We want to stick with somebody that's their specialty. Yeah. But right now, some of our original choices of who we are going to carry in those lines, they're just not available. They don't want to start a new thing, or there's all these weird, there's so many weird distributor agreements that there won't be new distributors, or they're worried about. We find that Bootstrap, because we're based out of Texas, well, we have too many distributors in Texas. We ship worldwide, man, and we for sure ship, across the nation, but there's the old school way of selling stuff by catalog, and we're kind of very disruptive in the space as far as the way we conduct business. All that being said, the people that we picked, and I would love to hear your opinion after really haven't used it yet, but you have set it up, at least played with it. That's a company that I have 20 years of background dealing with their products. Yeah. And it does take a minute to kind of figure out how to put it together. But once you do, man, it's real solid. And so that all those combination of things, I wouldn't change a thing with who we're going to carry or what we're going to wind up doing. Everybody will see in the spring. It's a little early, so kind of let the cat out of the bag, but that's all right.
Yeah. Well, and I'd like to comment on that because this might help somebody. But like I remember our first year, we did typical like lawn sprinklers, like the wands or whatever that go back and forth. I mean, I kind of laugh, right? Moving hoses around. And it's what you got to do. Right. You got to move hoses around, and you've got...
Well, especially when you're first starting, because you don't know where those beds are really going to wind up being.
Right. And we weren't doing permanent raised beds. And so, using just traditional irrigation methods, sprinklers, and that, let your kids run through, those kinds of things, and moving that around. And just that was so nightmarish. But then discovering drip tape, like that was it. And then, the nuances of that with the drip tape coming undone. And then, we have cats, and I don't know what it is, but a cat would chase a bug, and their claws go through that drip tape like you would not believe. Or somebody steps on the drip tape, and then you get holes in it. And so it really, you find all the nuances in them, and working with them is great, and patching them, but it really is. It's something that needs to be spent some time on looking at into, what are the different types of irrigation, models. And, you got Never Sink Farm out there. They're saying they don't do any drip line anymore. They're all overhead. And to me, I marvel at that, because that's a lot of water. And I think they're just like what you said before, every farm is different. The context, I mean, if you're in a high wind area, like I couldn't just do, especially where we get a lot of wind here, it's like, I can imagine just doing overhead. To me, it's always going to be a combination of drip and overhead.
Well, and just knowing that there's a difference between going from propagation to doing the microgreens and bottom watering, and then there's indoor growing versus vine crop growing versus outdoor growing. You're very well, if you have a mixed market type of garden, you're going to implement several different varieties of watering.
Yep. So and they can be homemade DIY setups, or get the kits. The kits, I think, are the way to go, especially if you're first starting out, Right. Yeah. No need to reinvent the wheel on that, but
we're still talking about year 2 now, or last, I guess we should say last year at this point.
2021. Yeah.
The mini market's going, more customers are being developed. there's a big push in the spring to, hey, the farmers market is now really open.
Yep.
And there's this influx of activity. It's the height of spring. You're still working at your company.
Mm-hmm.
Diane is here. Is your uncle there at that point?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. So Kathy, your wife, Diane, your aunt,
mm-hmm.
you in the wee hours of the night after dinner and everything is going out. Beds are being made. You're still scaling up. You're still figuring out systems. You've got 5,000 plants versus 20 flats.
Mm-hmm.
The farmers market's kicked off. There's a flurry of activity. We are coming off of a very crazy winter for us. How are you handling all those different stresses and being pulled 6 ways from Sunday? Plus, you're still a husband. You're still a dad.
Yeah. That was pretty messy. And I think back, it was really discouraging, honestly, last spring. Working through it, it was like the fact that we survived it, was a pat on the back. But looking at this year, I was like, I don't want to do that again, and it's like, and so if, we put things in place, in year 2 to continue to build the infrastructure so we don't have to build outside. So we're not fighting frost blankets every day. And so those types of things, you start realizing you reach this level where it's like, okay, we need to go back and refine some of these things, right? So all the while that we're moving forward, we're still trying to now refine, processes and things that we're doing that we've already implemented. And so that was like a lot of 2021. And then towards the latter part of 2021, which I'm jumping ahead, that's when I started putting the brakes on, on amount of time. Like, so now, like at the end of 2021, it was like I would only be outside. Thursday night was kind of like my night. I'd just go out and, get a 6-pack of beer and 2 headlamps, whereas before it was, I'd go through headlamps every night out there working. The farm was operational enough that I didn't have to be there every night. We had enough stuff in place. We had workers there, and to be able to, shut the doors. Only thing maybe at night, have to go down and shut down the hoop houses, roll
right
down the sides and everything. And so balance really started kicking in, because that was right around the time, especially coming off of last spring, it was exhausting, to say it lightly. We had to cover, a quarter of an acre just with frost blankets and plastic to get through that freak frost, and let alone 2 months later dealing with, winter Armageddon that, and it was a great experience, but it really made me realize how much I need to have priorities and focus on refinement and, stuff that's going to make me last longer, not burn out, because that stuff, doing that every year, and some people have to do that, if you can't make the investment into infrastructure,
and it's easy to miss family time.
Yeah.
So one thing that I was very happy to see you do last year is multiple times you were not at the market. You and Kathy were not at the market. You're at gymnastics or whatever else externally was going on family-wise. You guys were making time. Diana, super multifunctional, from seeding to harvesting to doing the farmer's market stand. I love to see that.
Yeah.
Not only did you bring on help pretty early on in your operation, but you brought in the right help.
Yeah.
And then you were able to spend that time. And it's one of those things, it's never enough, right?
Right.
It's never enough time to be a dad. There's never enough hours in the day to be a farmer. It's something that I think everybody will look back on once everybody's in college and stuff like that. Man, I wish I would have done this, I would have done that. And at the same time, you made the choice to move out here and to live this lifestyle. And I think what we all have to remember is, as a homesteader, the original goal of this, how much time you're really at home compared to somebody that works a 9 to 5 that quote unquote comes home at night. They're home on the weekends, but they're not really present.
Yeah. And farming is a business. And so anybody who wants to go out and do something like this is there's sacrifice involved. There is a lot of sacrifice. And that first year, I sacrificed a lot of family time. But we were going 100 miles an hour. The kids were all in a good spot, plugging in and things. And so I disappeared for a little while, but now I'm to that point where I protect that, and I think of some examples. Every successful businessman knows the sacrifice there is. And if they don't stop themselves from chasing that dollar, they're they're going to miss out on a lot of things. There was a guy who invented a product called NSX. It's in IT, VMware. He used to work for VMware, and then he went out and built this product, and then he sold it back to VMware for like $1.1 billion. And then on an interview, they asked him, he said, "Are you going to do that again? Or what's next?" He says, "No way." He says, "I lost my wife, I lost my family, I lost all my friends, because he literally locked himself in an apartment for 2 years and just coded, and just lost everything because he lost his focus on what was priority, and farming can do that. Any business can do that. Farming is really easy because one, it's right there at your property. And
never get away from it.
And there's
always something to do.
That's exactly right. And I tell my wife, like, every day, I'm like, there's no way we can get it all done. But I'm not saying, you cannot. There's no way. It's always going to be there tomorrow. Work is always going to be there tomorrow. And so you have to prioritize, and you do have to make sacrifice. So I think that first 12 months to 18 months, like, you need just to plan that with your family and say, look, Daddy or Mom is going to be away for a while we, go work on this. You're there, but your focus is elsewhere. Just to get this thing up, I keep imagining a boat getting up to plane, or even an airplane taking off and getting up to plane. Right? It's like there's so much energy that takes to get a boat, up to plane, up to where it gets on that water, and then it just cruises across. And I think that first 12 to 18 months, that's what you're doing when you're farming like this, is you're getting up to plane. And then when you get up there, now it's kind of like the captain says, you're free to move about, right? You can unplug your seatbelt, you can actually go do stuff, and they can go back to family time and having somewhat a normal life,
But I also want to encourage everybody at this stage that look at the example that you're providing, that you're investing into your own thing, your own family, your own business. Look at how hard it is to be an adult. Look at how hard it is to make anything of substance and how long it actually takes. All the while, if something did happen, you could have been there. Right? And I'm sure it did.
Oh, yeah.
Off and on. So knowing that you're building that for them, you said in the last episode you wanted them to have an example of, if they ever needed to fall back on practical skills, they've at least seen a real world example of it, that they can go back. When you're a kid, there's so many things get missed, or so many things you miss the context of how important something is. But I think those daily examples that turn into weeks, that turn into months, now 2 years later, there's all the trees have, all the trash trees have now yielded everything that you guys have going on right now. It has to be such a long-term impact on how they're going to view the world. Is the sacrifice, is it ever enough? Was it worth it? I can't help but think in this instance and in this lifestyle that, we're all thinking about here, that it's not the very best thing we can do currently.
Yeah. And we've made mistakes along the way. I know that, but
you should have.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't regret any of it. Our kids are aging out of our house, but I don't, I think that we did it at a good time. And, a lot of people think that, hey, doing this with small children is better. It probably is, because they're just raised with it, right? And they're actually, my kids were really into kind of gardening and things when they were younger. But then when we did the 5-year, 6-year stint in Fort Worth, they lost that, and then trying to get them back out to be involved has been kind of a struggle at times. That when we get them out there and we're all doing it, everybody's great and we're socializing. It's great family times, great memories. But in the long run, just as you said, when they are older, when you alluded to, when they get older, they're going to remember this. They're going to say, they know that Dad had this crazy dream to take this raw piece of land, and they've been there with every stage. Like when we croak and when they even contemplate to sell this, they're gonna know everything, every story about that piece of land. They've been there through the whole journey, and so that sacrifice that we made up front, a lot of it was family sacrifice. Is not all lost, because there's so much profit that they gain from watching how hard work can actually still make the American dream work, and to see to me, this is one of the biggest things I hope that they've instilled, is like, you can chase a dream. You can go build this thing. It's going to be a lot of work, a lot of sweat and tears. But I literally have, this is a living example for them to see what we started with zero, not even, empty land. It was trees, hideous land, we could say, and to be able to build this little mini paradise that looks, especially from a drone footage, looks like a little spot of paradise, I think that left an impression on them.
And I think in your case, very specifically, you have such a swing of IT skills, computer skills, this whole professional life over here versus the homesteading life, the market gardener. How well-rounded are they going to be where they have two examples of a professional career, a homesteading career, a very practical career? There's two sides to there's multiple sides to everybody. There's this itch that has to be filled. I think they're going to have much more choices.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, they're understanding what it is to be entrepreneurs as well. My 15-year-old has her own bakery, Desert Darling Bakery now, and so we've encouraged that because, it's like, especially when you're young, it's like you don't have a family, you can just go out and you can on a dime turn, right? You're like a speedboat in the water, whereas when you get older and you've got family, it's like it's one of those big cargo ships, with all the containers, right? It's like if you want to turn around, it's going to take you a couple miles to make a turn, right? A speedboat and a teenager, to go out and try and fail and, be an entrepreneur. I think that's your greatest opportunity. You don't have the wisdom. You got a lot of energy and flexibility. You're a speedboat, And so they've been encouraged to do that, to try things right now. And I that's one of the greater things, too, that has come out of this that we just were not expecting.
Walk us through the market just ended. It's Saturday at noon, and let's go to Saturday at noon for a week. What does a week look like at your place?
Yep. So we have a Trello board. That's the product we use, an app. It's just a Kanban board. If you're not familiar with that, it's like a sticky note concept. That has all your stuff that you need to do, and then you take your sticky note and you move it over to you're doing. And so that's what we use on the farm. There's 100 different ways you could probably do this, and so Saturday.
I think it's fun to say this is coming from an IT based person. Of course, there's an app.
Yep. There's an app for that. And so we all follow that board, which makes it really good easier. But we have a process in place. So literally the farm shuts down pretty much after the market, and we hang out the rest of Saturday and Sunday. We just do minimal things, keep critters alive.
Beg to differ there. You're at the market. You still have to go home and put all that crap
up. Right. Okay. Yeah. So I
really want to dial in here.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's good. So, Saturday, actually the market ends at 1:00. And we, as you alluded to, I think in the last episode, there's a little bit of fellowship there with the market vendors after, like, hey, how was it today? And so we ended up hanging out there for at least 30 minutes usually. And like even this last week, then Kit showed up and said, hey, actually, you know what? You got any of the cilantro left? And so, then I unpacked the truck, to find the one tote.
Kit is the bakery 2 blocks up from the market. My favorite place in town by far.
Yeah, wonderful food.
Sweetheart of a guy. I love him to death.
Great guy. Yep. Our first restaurant customer. And so we hang out with, vendors. There's always a customer or something that will show up and, we have something, or else just a lot of the customers are friends, they've turned into friends. So we hang out and chat with them, and we might be completely dog tired and, we just want to get home and unload but we hang out there for a while. And then, so we'll either, eat, typically we'll just eat even at the market. Somebody from Cooks or somebody will have some food up. Otherwise, if not, we'll go and, Sayla, our youngest daughter, she's our market buddy. So she comes with us every Saturday. So she'll pick out where we go eat otherwise. And so we go get some food, because the last thing you want to do is go home and cook after you've been, doing the market.
This is the atypical thing that nobody talks about. Everybody goes to get something to eat after the market.
Yeah. Yep. And
eat local, except for when you leave the market.
And honestly, most of the time we're eating Cook's pork. Usually that's what we have over there. But
so for context, Cooks is the last name of some folks that are up there.
Cook's Farm and Ranch,
pig farmers, and they always have
sausage,
pulled pork, sausage ready to go, tamales, a whole variety of canned stuff. So they very much feed Not only a bunch of people in our community, but the market
Yep,
itself.
the market vendors too. Yep, and so we don't even need coffee because we get up there and Liza's coffee's there, and she lives an hour away, so I always give her crap because she's usually late because she has to drive so far in. I'm like, Liza, like this market doesn't open up until you get here because you got the coffee for the vendors,
right?
So I always threaten her. So I'm going to go up to the Paris Bakery and get coffee if you're not here in the next 10 minutes. But yeah, so we pack up, we get some food if we need, and then we head home. And the rest of the kids, so they know this, especially in the summertime when we've been at the market for 4 or 5 hours, from 8 to 1. And we get it there, of course. You need to get there an hour early, and then you're there for an hour after, tearing down typically and hanging out. And we get home. The other kids that did not go to the market, they know. We could pull in the driveway, we honk the horn. That means they come out and they help unload because at this time,
at the very least,
yeah.
Come on.
And plus, we might be bringing home food, or at least we've got some rolls for Sunday morning that we get from Polly from the Food Snob. That's our routine too. So they know that we always bring home goodies, and so they are expected to come out and they help unload, and that is just even that little bit. When you come home and you've got a half hour of unloading and getting stuff kind of situated, semi-organized for Monday. That little bit of help is great. And so we unload, and then at that point, we just keep critters and plants alive until Monday morning. We just try to do minimal stuff.
Which is why it's nice everything is on a routine and a schedule at this point.
Yep. And so then Monday morning comes around, which is happens every 7 days. we empty the microgreen trays from the harvest on Friday. We basically clean up from all the harvesting from Thursday and Friday. Clean up all of the market stuff. We got to sanitize all the totes and just go through that whole process that we have. And then we start the microgreens. That's another thing that we do on Mondays. So, and then we start getting into all of the, all the other tasks, if you will, throughout the rest of the week.
So the tasks, weeding, feeding the animals, Kathy's taking care of the chickens, all leading up to Thursday and Friday harvest. What's Thursday look like?
Yeah, and so our harvest days are starting to even, now we brought another restaurant, so our harvesting is now not only on Thursday and Fridays, which, we're expecting to get to that spot, but for the most part, we do, I'd say 80-90% of our harvesting on Thursday and Friday. So
in your arsenal, and I think this is very important to point out, is you guys do have a pretty good sized walk-in cooler on farm.
Yes.
Which gives you a ton of storage space that a lot of folks don't have that do allow you to harvest so early.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's really key. I mean, and honestly, you can do them. You can get regular refrigerators, and you need something though for your produce. I mean, it is a game changer, and I have to weigh the pros and cons of, do I leave that thing on, because it's a big beast. The model we have, it's not just one of the cool bots with an air conditioner. It's a standard walk-in cooler. It's 6x12, so it's pretty big, and it's significant. I can notice it running on the bill, but honestly, the fact that I can come home from the market and throw stuff in and go kick my feet up, it's worth the extra cost. It's not. It definitely comes right out of the profit, but there's no monetary value right now that I could put against it, because it affords me the ability to come home, throw stuff in there, and deal with it on Monday. And just to give it to R&R, on Saturday and Sunday. So I would highly recommend, some sort of cooling system, right, for your produce.
I think it's highly overlooked.
Oh yeah, it is. Yep. I never even thought of that. I mean, that and the wash station, it really depends upon if you're not selling greens and things, you may not need a wash station, but at some point you still need some of these fundamental things that you so far out of your vision when you first started this, right? It's like, I had no idea that we would need a wash station, and we were just washing our eggs and the kitchen sink and lettuce, and it just was really clunky, inefficient, and so very much needed a walk-in cooler, and I'd even say a wash and pack station area there. So, but harvest, getting to harvest, so we have, and it depends on the time of the year. Like if we're if it's in the main market, we're harvesting lettuce, we need that stuff off before 9 a.m., especially here in the, deep south, where the sun is relentless on those crops. And so we always start with all the cool weather crops, harvesting them first, and then we'll just kind of work our way through. In the summertime, of course, it's a little different because if we're harvesting okra, that's sometimes a daily thing. So okra, all the squashes, those are things we have to harvest daily, and then we store those in just kind of in the house, climate controlled environment. And tomatoes, they're really resilient too. So a lot of those, the crops that don't care about what time of the day, granted, still everything should be picked when it's cooler, but we do prioritize the greens above anything else, and so we get those, all the greens, get them picked either in the cooler right away, or else get them in some cool water, start processing them right away, cleaning them. So, and then that's usually an all day thing, and I underestimated how much harvest time is, and I just heard it again, even though I've heard this now 2 or 3 times, I still try to defeat the odds of this, and that basically 75% of your time is spent harvesting and selling, and you realize that, I don't know that it's that much for us right now. I mean, it's definitely one full day of our entire crew, and so that might break into 2 half days, Thursday and Fridays right now. So, but as we progress and get going, I'm sure that's going to keep increasing more and more.
So going into Friday, most of the crops are harvested. Let's just say half.
Mm-hmm.
Still harvest to be done on Friday. And then there's also getting ready for the market. And I know that, at least for me, it should be for everybody, there's efficiencies in place as to, this is our market vehicle. This is where we keep all of the till and the cash box and all this stuff. This is our process for going to the bank and getting change and all that kind of thing. Assuming that the harvest is, starting in the morning on Friday, like you said, for the cool weather stuff, and progressing into the day, what are you doing Friday to get ready for the market itself, and how are you storing those supplies in between?
Yeah. And we still are messy in a lot of these areas, change because we have 4 kids, and we have a change box and our till that always has money in. We rob it throughout the week. Allowances to get,
well, and don't forget, it's a shakedown every time you go to school. They always want $2.
Yeah, that's right. And so even personally, it's like, well, I've got my own personal ATM here right now because I've got the till box, and so that bites us in the butt so many times. And you would think after now doing this 2 seasons that we would have more discipline around there, but it's too convenient to have that money there. And so we will typically, hopefully before Friday, we will have gone and stocked the change and got our typical change that we need for the till box. But then everything else, we have one tote, apart from all the totes that have the produce in that are likely either in the walk-in cooler or else in climate controlled area. We have one main tote that we bring with that's got our till box, it's got all our extra little bags if we need to rebag produce, a scale, our signs, all of the logistical things that we need for setting up the market, our tablecloths, right, all of that. So most of that fits in one large tote, and we're starting to outgrow that, but that is kind of like, if we don't have that, we're running back to the farm. And typically we don't forget that. It's usually, something that doesn't fit in there that we forget, like the sign or something for, our egg sign or something. But we try to keep all that relatively close in the same area just because, and now we're on a routine, it's like I'm loading up the truck from the walk-in cooler, and Kathy will get everything inside right by the door, and then we just know like that's a collecting spot, and then before we leave, all that goes into the truck, and then we head out. And now we're getting to the point where we bring 2 vehicles because we either forget something,
right,
or somebody needs to go get change. Like that's still a common thing. I have to run to Brookshire's and stand in line, and they don't open up their cash area or the customer service till like 9 a.m. And so that works great during mini market, but if you're there during the main market, and you need change because you forgot to get change during the week because I robbed the piggy bank.
Why is it that the first person that comes up always pays with a $100 bill? Where are you getting this $100 bill this early in the morning? Quit it.
Yeah, I wonder that too. It never fails. Yeah. Pretty much the routine, then we get to the market and, we set up. Kathy, she does most of the
I'm going to back us up. So we're still on Friday, you're kind of getting ready. I'm curious as to the family situation Friday night,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't care how long you've been going to the market, there's still tomorrow's the show.
Yeah.
That's what everything we do is for tomorrow. How are you able to, at this point, with a couple of years under your belt, sit down and enjoy dinner without that thing going on in the back of your mind? Did I remember the sign? Did we harvest everything? Did we turn off the water? Whatever the case may be. How are you able to kind of settle in at night?
There has been a lot of rigor around that. So Friday nights I've very much protected. Just like I want to be done with everything at 5 o'clock, and it still doesn't get done. Like here's a good example: is like microgreens. Sometimes based on climate and weather and the chamber and the storm shelter, like they need an extra day to grow, and that is like it literally causes my stomach to turn, because it's like I know now we have to somehow get those microgreens harvested Saturday morning, either at the market or just before we go to the market. And those little things add so much stress because it throws off your schedule. And so I literally have and I'm pretty stern on this, like everything's got to be done by Friday, 5 o'clock. And whatever doesn't get done, because it causes too much stress, And so we do relax a lot on Saturday night or Friday nights rather. And it doesn't bother me so much. Like I said, unless I know like we don't have the microgreens fully harvested or something.
But that's after 2 years of practice.
Yeah.
And consciously getting to this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there was literally, and we prided ourselves on some of this, like, hey, we want to have our produce so fresh. We want it within 12 hours to the customer. And I mean, literally, I'm up at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning harvesting tomatoes, and it was more so because I didn't have time throughout the week, but then it turned into, oh, this is our marketing slogan, me working at midnight. I just picked these not even 12 hours ago for you. And it's like,
isn't it funny what we put on ourselves at farmers that the customers really could care less about?
Yeah. They don't, it doesn't matter to them.
They are so happy that you're there.
Yeah.
They're so happy you have anything. Not that you should not strive for excellence, but to, from the get-go, put on these weird parameters like 12 hours ago or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of them out there.
Mm-hmm.
If you're putting yourself in this box from day one without the practice of it, you're really painting yourself up against a wall.
Yeah, you are. And it's setting unrealistic expectations. I mean, like I said, mine was more of a justification. It wasn't necessarily like, that's literally why I was out there at midnight. It just happened to be that I had no other time to harvest this week. And so therefore I'm at midnight. Therefore I have a new marketing slogan. Oh, we're going to have these tomatoes to you in less than 12 hours, kind of thing, or 24 hours, whatever it is.
6 months later, you're up at midnight every Friday.
Yeah. And it doesn't make sense. And there's, but it's just a weird thing that you justify. And like I said, at that first year we had to, because I had,
of course,
no choice.
Of course. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Saturday morning.
Yeah.
Waking up, doing those last little bit of harvest. I've been there on Saturday mornings, and it's very typical of a lot of places I've seen, including myself. The 2-vehicle thing, I think, is key, especially if you're in this with a partner, your wife, your husband, whatever the case may be. Half the time, somebody's going, like you said, to the store or back to the farm or whatever the case may be. We got in the habit of, I'm going to go set up. Don't come until right before the market for that last little bit of thing. We actually packed up the food truck, and this is where I had an unfair advantage a lot of the times. The Friday, the day before, and everything was on refrigerator in the truck. Of course, it took a long time to get there. A lot of people, most people could not do that because of the refrigeration issue. But the point is, I still didn't have Wendy come up until right before, because I forgot the lemons, I forgot the knife, I forgot whatever the case may be.
My wife and I, we don't fight. We call them discussions. And so, Saturday mornings are kind of vulnerable for discussions because of that, and we're to the point where now it's not as often, but when you're trying to get up there and get set up in a timely manner, and, something starts going awry, somebody forgot to get changed, somebody forgot, whatever it is, it's like all of a sudden, it's like, darts start getting tossed at each other, and you have to be mindful of that, especially when you're setting up and you have customers come up to the table. And it's like, Where's the dongle for the square card, or the square card reader? Like, seriously, can we not put everything in the same spot every week? It's like,
and you're talking to yourself, but it's within earshot.
Yeah. No, she can hear me under my breath, and and that goes back to what we said on that last episode. One minor change can just cause disarray. It's like, she one weekend decided to put all of the square card readers in a different spot, and then the next week, my daughter and I, while she's setting up, we're trying to ring up people, and we've got, it's just, and those little things cause disturbances. But anyways, yeah, so we can, we can have some heated times, and that it's needless. A lot of that stuff is needless, because it can be really peaceful setting up, and you want to make it an art and just have this whole thing, but when things aren't ready and organized.
Well, and there's always, every single week, that person that comes up 30 minutes before.
Yeah.
Hey, man.
Mm-hmm.
I was always shocked about a couple of vendors that would always come up and want to chat as we're setting. I'm like, hey, this is dress rehearsal, man.
Yep, that's exactly right. We still have that, and it's good that we have two people setting up because and you have to just kind of walk and talk to these people, and they kind of get it eventually. But yeah, that happens every week still. And the customer, that no matter what time we get there, there's always going to be somebody there. And sometimes like right now our carrots are like flying off shelf. We can't even bring any to the market. They're already sold before we get to the market. Everybody's got their name on them. But there's people that show up just because they know there's limited supply of certain things, and so they want to be there early. And we welcome that. I'm not going to turn away anybody, but it is difficult when you're trying to set stuff up, and but you can never get there early enough. Somebody was always going to want something before have your till open.
This is just a good time to remind everybody that the charger. I mean, it's in this day and age, the chargers, the credit card readers, such a vital piece of equipment. Mm-hmm. It's imperative that we have backups. I mean, not only did we have Square, but we also had PayPal, and we had readers for both. I mean, we were at the market, a month ago, and there was no electricity, and somebody couldn't take credit cards. Yeah. What a mess that was. Right. That totally could have been avoided. But life is what life is, and we all do the very best we can. I always suggest that people also have enough things to lend out and possibly never get back from other vendors. And in a perfect world, that's what we should all strive for, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and that's really good. I mean, that's another thing with our family vendors. Like, I remember the first time we showed up, somebody said, do you take credit card? We're like, no. And our vendor, Quirky Bell Bakes, she's like, oh, well, I'll just do this. You just pay me cash. We're like, great. So we just, did that. And then it was realized, yeah, we need a card reader. And then the same thing was like, well, we need a second card reader, and so it's a constantly evolving process. And
so we're to Saturday morning, 8:00. Mm-hmm. We now have 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 5 hours before we're back to the beginning of our discussion here. How fast does those 5 hours go, or how slow can they go?
Yeah, and a lot of that depends on what the climate and literally the Texas weather is doing. Like if it's I think we get like maybe 3 perfect farmer market days a year. And
that's the day the damn parade or something's going on.
Yeah, that's right. And there's something else in you're competing with, but yet we all survive somehow. But it can be very long. Most of the time, though, it's relatively quick. And that's if you've got a lot of product to sell, I mean, we really have a heart for people who sit there all day and especially some of the artisan side of it that, they get 1 or 2 customers, that's really difficult. We've been there. But now it's like, we're pretty busy. We get it, we have to hurry up and rush to get set up. And then there's kind of a lull, and then then it ramps up, and then it's like 2 hours of just back to back nonstop, so to speak. Little breaks here and there, and then another lull, and then another wave. And those ebbs and flows are different every week, but there's still a consistent pattern where it's like you're busy, you get to rest, you're busy, and you get to rest. So
it's one of those things where you're working out in the field, and farmers are always the first ones to notice when trees are budding out, or when the first whatever is coming out of the ground. We're also the first ones to know, okay, it's soccer season, or whatever the case may be. The seasons in which people's Saturdays are monopolized is very apparent a lot of days.
Yeah, it is. And for us, the fact that now we've got a customer base that, they're very persistent, we don't notice that as much. Like this last Saturday was like so evident and apparent that we just, we sent out a message and everybody, our typical customers showed up. And so even with all the events that are happening downtown, we still will get our main flow of customers that will come through. And so, but yeah, it's those events that take away that, could have, set off a record or something, for that day, like that perfect day when, the weather is finally perfect and there's a parade in town or something, like, right. But
let's talk about, there's a couple of events that happen at our market in particular, and I would hope that everybody has this thing to prepare for. So for instance, we have Hatch Chili Fest. As a native New Mexican, I always cringe a little bit because it's not entirely accurate, but I am very thankful that we do actually have Ron go to New Mexico and bring back Hatch chilies. But that's our main, it's coming up on the end of the season, still hot as hell, but that's the biggest day of the year outside of opening day for sure. So if you're going to have a major event like that, we lived for Hatch Chili Fest. So I encourage you to ask me questions about it. So as that day is coming up, that the volume is going to increase 5 or 6 times the amount of people than what we normally have. Some people, this is their only time that they come to the market. You want to leave a good impression. At the same time, it's balls to the wall. Everything's absolutely bonkers that entire day from the time we get there to the time we leave. What are you guys doing to get ready for an event?
Yeah, so we have, especially for us, it's opening day, and like you said, Hatch. Like I always right now, I'm already envisioning what does May 1st look like, or whatever that first Saturday is, and so that to me is like, what are we preparing for now? Hatch, I was totally taken back, because our first year, the first 2 years was pandemic, so we didn't, there was no Hatch Chili Fest that we were part of. And so this last year, Gibson Gardens, they said, well, hey, we're canning and getting all our stuff canned, and they were kind of end of season for what their produce was. So they were just getting ready to can everything. And by that time, it's like, it's too late for us. Like I didn't, because in farming, you can't just all of a sudden next week have something. You've got to be like,
you can't double production.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge, feat in of itself, and another probably podcast by itself. But, to be able to prepare for something, that's a month away, you've got to have 2-3 months before, at least in farming, right? Because crops don't grow, that quick. And so we did as much as we could, but we said, all right, well, we can do salsa, we can do some. So we added some quick things that we thought we could do to prepare for that, and even saved the previous week we withheld some produce and harvested, and so we'd have a larger produce offering, that day.
Right. And I guess from my point of view on Hatch specifically, and I can't stress this enough, how important Hatch green chilies are to not only the New Mexican economy, but just New Mexicans in general. It's our whole, everything revolves around these chilies that, man, it's easy for me to get real squirrely on this one, but a Hatch variety grown outside of the Hatch Valley is not a Hatch green chili to me. Yeah. So that's why I appreciate Ron driving over there and getting it. But being from knowing that cuisine intimately my entire life, and then being here, plus having the commercial kitchen and the food truck and the way I did all my stuff, we would have very, very authentic New Mexican dishes and offerings that we were, as a food truck, able to scale up for sure. That was the way we mitigated that. So having a food truck does give you the ability to scale up very rapidly for event, because that's what you do. I mean, everything is an event anyway.
Right. So you incorporated Hatch chilies in everything, just about, right?
For sure. And then as far as the mocktails went, we made agave, mock margarita kind of thing. So it very much fit into the whole theme of the day. Right. I think as far as events go, and the larger lesson to be learned here is listening to Gibson Gardens and knowing that what is everybody talking about? What's all this, what's coming up, and it's real easy to get discouraged on a day like that if you're not prepared to handle the volume of people, especially ones that may have a lot of questions that or that you don't have to answer at that time of the season because you've gone through the whole season, and the people that come to the market are the people that come to the market and they know. But for visitors, there's a lot of hand holding that day. There's a lot of volume that day. Having extra people, having extra cash, for change, it's really something you have to talk to the other vendors that have lived through it before. Plus, at this year, I mean, everybody's been cooped up in their house for the last 2 years. I imagine it was even, I wasn't in town, so I missed it, but I imagine it was pretty wild.
Yep, it was. Yep. And it was neat because everybody did it. Everybody did something with the hatch chilies. Everybody had that theme. Even that's why we did our salsa. I failed to mention that, but that was the one thing we could do rapidly, right? Was to kind of have a hatch chili salsa with that. But and I would encourage like you said, if there's farmers markets out there not doing that, I mean, like that's huge because one, it just spotlights the farmers market. Even if it is just a one time, we would like to see us more often, once a month, some sort of major event up there to get the community out there. It's such a neat little setting, and there's plenty of room for us, and it's great just to get people out there and to, it's an advertisement, and it's also just good community, I mean, it's really something that I don't think has been tapped into fully from this community.
You want to see more of that. What can you do as a vendor to make more of those events? Yeah.
And I would imagine most farmers market work similar, but there's always somebody from the city, that has
or a market manager.
Yeah, or market manager somewhere. That's somebody that you escalate to, and I think that's where it is. For us, our market is really driven by.
That's a key word, isn't it?
Our market, though, is largely driven by the vendors, meaning the city does not tell us what to do. We make the recommendations. We're saying, hey, we want to see this, we want to do that, and so we constantly are, and we have meetings, annual meetings. Sometimes I think there's biannual meetings. There's maybe 2 meetings a year where we can, bring this up collectively. All the vendors get together and speak to the city, and I think that's very important. But it really still needs to be something driven by, like, these events need to be, somebody has to have the idea. And a lot of times you don't want to say that idea because then you become the volunteer and the guy who's got to run it.
It's hard to run an event as a vendor because you have your own thing to take care of.
Right. And so if we can, bring these ideas up and not, and kind of pitch the idea and not run with them, I think that's the best thing. Now, we've only been spitballing at things to do, and how that looks. But yeah, it really is. It's more of a community, thing that has to come up and to be worked and idealized amongst the vendors, I think, to have those.
An event has to be announced. It has to be, somebody has to be talking about this to drum up the interest. How do you feel about an individual market vendor's responsibility, not only to themselves, but as the market as a whole, to get the word out just on a daily or on a weekly basis? Hey, we're still here. This is my neighbor. This is, what's your take on that?
Yeah, that's really challenging, honestly. So we can actually, interact with the social media platform that the city uses or has, and so we can actually, make posts to that, which is nice. But outside of that, we don't have much. So we're not going to go advertise for the farmers market on the radio. Now, the city actually has been doing that. I just heard it twice yesterday on the radio, so that's great. But we are constantly evangelizing for our farmers market, as are all of the other vendors, at least the main vendors that are there. We're constantly, promoting the vendor or the farmers market, especially in the mini market, because people just assume that the market's done. But, we actually go year round. And so that has been probably the strongest challenge, and that is letting people know that we're still there. And, every vendor, I think, has to have that responsibility to do that. So, everybody's customer base realizes that, hey, this thing is going year round, and it's picking up a lot of momentum. I think just by individually everybody doing that, making their posts, sharing with their customers, and even at the end of the main market, like that last month is, hey, starting next month, we're still going to be here, but it's only going to be from 11 to 1, and you got to start that word out early because, you start the week before and, you're only going to get those people that showed up that day.
Well, those are really the true fans. Those are your diehard 52 weeks a year kind of folks.
Right. Yep.
This is it's not quite done with everything I wanted to talk about with season 2, but this is a good natural break that we let people wait till the next week about that. Last question. on this one, though, is going from year 2 to what we're fixing to talk about, year 3. What's that confidence level look like?
It's a lot higher. Like we know where we're heading. The vision is kind of solidified. It's not like,
it's changed.
Yeah, it's changed, but it's not like, right now it's kind of a hardened vision, if you will. And so we know our routines and our processes. We have a lot of refinement. And so our confidence is there because we know, and that's been largely based on the community, accepting us, receiving us, and the ability that we've been actually to generate revenue. Like it's going to work, we, at this point now, it's, Mother Nature could take us out, but that's it. And, for some reason, a pivot in entire lifestyle, or changes in life, but outside of that, there's all the shaky ground has kind of sifted away, and it's like, okay, we understand now our market. We understand, at first, we didn't know what we were gonna do. Were we selling plants? Or, our identity is probably a better way to say it, is I feel like our identity has been solidified. And
a small town is hard on new folks moving in.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like whether it's a business or a person, you're trying to find your place in this world. It's like, again, and we were going to sell chicken eggs and plants. That was our first thing. It's like reality, and all of a sudden you start finding your passions. You start finding out what you don't want. Brassicas, they're fun to grow, but they're just, there's not really a place for them in our market. We can't sell them, so why grow them? So, just so many things that have been solidified over the past year that really have provided the confidence for us, to move into year 3, with a solid plan, and not even having to write down pen and paper, just knowing, okay, this is what we're known for. This is what people are expecting. This is what we're hearing, all our feedback and things. And so I feel like we have an identity and a branding, and now that we actually have a platform to kind of build on.
It's a very gained knowledge that you pick up of just knowing what to do.
Yep.
How much less do you worry now, and what type of things concern you now versus what they did in the year before?
Yeah, as I said, I think I was in the last episode about the frost blankets. I haven't even pulled one out this year, and which is great. It's a relief. Probably still have to pull them out, but not. It's almost like a helicopter mom, and I use this story maybe too much, but it's funny anyway. So we have 4 kids, right? The first kid, right? When you have the diaper on, it's like they tinkle in it. It's like, oh, we got to change that thing right now. And then the second child comes, and you wait a little longer, and the third child and the fourth child's that diaper is hanging off the bottom, and people are telling you.
And the first kid's changing the diaper.
Well, yeah, and so you got people saying you need to change that diaper. Nah, we can get one more out of it. You start relaxing quite a bit. It's like plants are going to survive. And so there's a lot of that. That stress of worry is not so much there. You can only control what you can control. The weather, as we've realized in the last 24 months of our existence here, is unpredictable. It's absolutely crazy. But now I don't fret about it as much. I feel like we've been through everything that Mother Nature, apart from a major tornado, we've been through things we'll never see in our life again. 2-week winter storm, or a 1-week winter storm. That'll never hopefully happen again. But if so, we've got the experience for it.
Right.
And I'm not fretting about it, And so just getting all of these things in place and having 24 months under a belt of hard, sincere focus of 24 months, of sincere focus has really, I think, given us such a foundation that it's shakeable, but it's not going to move us. We're going to get rocked here and there, but it's a pretty solid foundation, I feel.
Well, that's 2 months in the last 2 episodes. The next episode, we're going to go into what year 3 looks like and some infrastructure changes. Thanks for being here and sharing your wisdom. So we'll see you on the next one, folks.